Hi there, it's been a long time since I published something, but today I have something important to share for you. At least for higher level managers and executive managers, this should be the gold you are looking for. I had a more than 1 hour conversation with Ahmad Fahmy on the why, how, and what of Gemba walks and Gemba sprints. You better listen in, as you don't want to be recognized as one of the following: an ostrich manager, head in the sand, ignores problems hoping they go away, thrives in crisis-rich environments, ironically. Or a seagull manager, swoops in, makes a lot of noise, dumps his shit, problems in other words, flies off again. Or the mushroom manager, keeps people in the dark, gives them shit and expects them to grow, typically spotted in legacy organizations. Or this line manager, roars a lot, dominates meetings, never listens, and thinks fear equals respect. Or also the helicopter manager, constantly hovers, meddles in every detail, creates turbulence, then disappears before cleanup time. Or last but not least, being recognized as a Parrot Manager, repeats corporate buzzwords with no real understanding. Let's synergize our agile OKRs to leverage innovation. No. You want to be recognized as a knowledgeable manager that supports its teams in the best way possible instead. So let's get us into the conversation, shall we? I kept it short, I kept it sweet, and here we go. So let's first start with why you are a fan actually of those Gemba walks, Gemba sprints, or anything related.
I just feel like there's this thing you experience as a coach where you're hired and you're expected to like wave some magic or do some magic and just magically fix a situation. And to me, I think a big part of my job is exposing the reality of the situation to people who can do something about it. That's like a core aspect of my coaching. And I think a core aspect of many of the methodologies we like is to really expose the truth to the decision makers, as opposed to obfuscate the truth or make it more beautiful that can be presented in PowerPoint, etc. And I think there's no more powerful way for senior leaders than to actually go to Gemba, or in other words, like the ground truth. So rather than exposing it through either production deliveries or etc., to me, the quickest way is to get them to go down to the ground truth and actually work with the teams in a meaningful way. And so sometimes leaders would say, okay, I do go, I have a skip level, or I go and I travel and I visit and I give the troops effectively a skip level meeting or something like that. And that's not what I'm talking about at all. And so to me, I'm a big fan because I think for change to happen, senior leaders need to get involved. And the best way to get senior leaders involved is to get them involved, as opposed to report up to them. What they would prefer from me a lot of times is to answer the question, how is everything going? Do you need anything from me, etc. And they very much keep an arm's length away from the actual reality. But exactly as you say, to rebuild trust or build trust when it never existed in the first place, because just by virtue of bureaucracies and scientific management, there is really very little trust by definition between the leadership and as Craig would say, for example, the meat widgets, those doing the work on the ground. And there's the rebuilding of trust. There's also bringing those who are working on the thing much closer to the client, because a lot of times the client relationship, the sense of urgency, is owned by that sort of leadership class. And so a lot of times leaders will be like, why is there no sense of urgency? I'm very stressed. Well, you manage that relationship, and then there's many levels of obfuscation before it gets to those working. So when you get the leadership and those at the ground truth together, there's a lot of, in the beginning, discomfort, definitely discomfort. And it actually highlights the lack of trust when the leadership comes to Gemba. There is like, what are you doing here on both sides? I don't want you here. And then the leaders, I don't want to be here. Right. And that really shines a light on, like you said, the lack of trust that has grown over many, many years.
One of the struggles I have in getting it started, or the why, is I see way too many leaders leading on abstractions of reality and into PowerPoints and Excel sheets. And then they have a short time span available to spend time on this problem versus another program or product or another department or another unit. So it's a very fragmented world in leadership, where it's where at least the feeling is we don't have the time to spend or we don't have so much time to actually go see at the ground floor for every department, every unit they have.
So let's talk about that, and let's rephrase not enough time to it's not a priority. Because that's all that term means. When someone says, let's say, for example, Jurgen, you come and visit me in Istanbul. Let's say, I'd love to see you, I just don't have the time. That means seeing you is not a priority. If I say, you're coming, I'm dropping everything, I need to see you, you're a priority. And so when a leader uses, or a manager, a senior manager uses the B word, which is I'm too busy, you can just flip out, this thing is not a priority. And I don't suggest that a leader, because it's impossible, go to Gemba for every one of their products. But I do believe they should be at Gemba for certain products, that are either highly important or critical or a burning platform, or this is how we're going to get to Mars, etc. But if they say this is not, like we would love to, but great, I love this idea, I just don't have, I'm just too busy, that means this idea is just not important. And by the way, that's how I use it to sell them on the importance. And so that's all that means. That means going to Gemba is not a priority. And something like, why did we hired me to go to Gemba? Why should I go? I mean, I've hired you to continue keeping me at arm's length. So that whenever somebody says, I'm too busy to go, I just immediately tell the leader, oh, so it's not that important.
Buy-in of the leaders and the teams. So both need to buy into it, of course. Not one or the other. If it's only buy-in for my leader, which I had, by the way, at the client of ours, the leader was like, yeah, let's do this. But the past relationship was grown into a situation where it was not like, okay, as a leader, go to the teams and ask. This would be not good. You have to wait until we have fertilized the ground well enough that you get invited.
Yeah.
So, and then the team is invited, and the leader went for 2 days as a team member, actually operating as a team member in that single team. So the first day doing mock programming, by the way.
Mm.
Second day participating in the refinement, and then after refinement in developing a smaller feature. So the fun, this is really making time for 2 days from, in this case, the CEO of the organization, or the real boss of the organization. Making time for 2 days being a team member shows significant dedication, in my opinion already. Being a real team member, he learned a lot. I learned a lot about inefficiencies. He learned a lot about efficiencies. He also learned that mob programming was actually useful and not inefficient as he initially thought it would be.
Yeah.
So it was a great way. It's just important that both parties need to invite each other to it.
Maybe the only difference was the scale. When I ran it in India, it was massive in scale, in that I needed the leadership and the head of product and the CTO and the development management all to come and see really the ground truth. And so the first time I ran what later ended up being called the Gemba Sprint, and I'll explain why I named it in a second. because that's part of the psychology of all of this. There was a client of mine that did a massive acquisition. There was their first nearly $1 billion acquisition. And the CIO was telling me about, basically some of the symptoms or the smells that he's been hearing about from this acquisition. And so I told him, I was like, do you really want to know what's happening? Then you have to come with me to India. Because there they had like 24 teams or 22 teams working on the core product. And if it's truly a priority for you, you take out a week or 2 weeks, you join an entire sprint, a team for 2 weeks. The reason I did that first is similar to your example. If the parent company CIO, so this is not the company itself, it's the parent company CIO is going to take 2 weeks. I knew it's going to immediately eliminate the B word from the new company's CTO and because once the parent company CIO is going to take 2 weeks off, I know what's going to happen. They're going to okay, if it's that important for this guy to do it, then it's very important. So as soon as he said he's coming, I had to cap the amount of people coming. I had to actually cap it. Like everyone now wanted to come because the boss's boss is going to come, and he's signaling, again, this is a priority. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and spend a week with a team. And one story I wrote about in the initial article was the CIO, they had prepared a separate room for meals for the executives. But the CIO would go with his team to wherever they ate, and he'd eat with them, whatever they were eating, and he would hang out, and then they would go out. And then he did a brilliant job of making them feel comfortable.
Yep.
And similar to you, there was every night a debrief where people would say what waste did they observe, and very transparent, like a fishbowl type thing. What waste did they observe? Yep. And what waste can be eliminated almost immediately. A simple example was the build server took over half an hour to build. So the CTO, not the parent company of the company itself, noticed that the build server was taking half an hour to an hour to build the software. So he was like, 22 teams building once or twice a day. How much waste is this? And so he saw things that he couldn't believe. I mean, like the amount of waste just waiting on the build server, or the fact that most people had one small screen rather than 2 screens. Again, it all comes back to scientific management. It's in a way easier to stay up here and be delivered a message to, and then say, hey, the teams suck, or the management suck, or the coaches suck. But when you go down to the ground, then do you suck? Like you take a high degree of accountability. It's easier to have plausible deniability. Well, first I'll say, get what you can, right? But I insist on it being multi-day because of what I've observed. It's the first day, it's ceremonial and people are still on their best behavior. Think of a workshop. The third day is when the magic happens. When people are kind of like, the first day is they're still feeling each other out and everyone is like artificial harmony. By the third day is when when the arguing and the debating and you let your hair down, etc. And so if I'm trying to maximize learning, I need more than one day. And so I'll give you a real example that's happening right now in one of my clients. The senior leader, very, very senior guy, but very good, wants to create change. He's like, I just don't understand why we can't move faster. Basically, why can't we deliver twice the stuff in less time? I don't understand. I'm paying all this money, all this kind of stuff. So I told him, how about this deal? We will attempt to take on twice as much work. And he got really excited. So I said, in the backlog, even though the teams have this kind of sort of relative velocity, we're going to overload the system. And we're going to put twice as much work in with the same amount of constraints around quality, etc. And he got really excited. I said, so long as you're willing to join one of the teams for the entire sprint, and your leadership team each join one of the teams, and you're responsible now for delivering twice as much work along with the teams. And then it's all of a sudden, I was like, that's the acid test. You know, are you willing to join the teams for a sprint? I know you're a very senior guy. What I'm saying is for a sprint, and let's even make the sprint 1 week, where it's like, you can call it a hackathon or whatever. But let's try to deliver what you want, but you have to join the teams, and almost let's treat it like when you performance test the system by overloading it to see, you know, where all of the waste. And then he said, you know what? Yeah, let's do that. The product owner that I mentioned, the head of product, the guy named Mike, when he went to India, he joined the team and he wanted to add an additional value, a name value pair in the dropdown. That's it. So the dropdown as a name value pair and wants to add another one. That's it. And the teams told him the estimation is going to be at least 1 quarter. So at least 1 quarter. So he's like, you know what? I'm joining that team. I just need to understand, because like, I remember when we started building this product, they used to take 20 minutes, less. You know, we'd add a new value, like trait type is like FX options, and you know, here's the name, here's the value, go. And now you're telling me it takes 3 months at least. So he joins the team and he sees. And so I told the team, this is now your opportunity to explain to him why things take so long. Like really to explain to him, because he doesn't truly understand. He just gets a big estimate. And so what they showed him was that this code has been forked 18 times. There's 18 versions of the code in the wild. And so when he asks to any single modification, they need to go to 18 different code bases. And so he never understood forking or any of these things. And I was like, explain it in normal language. So like, we copied and pasted the code 18 times basically. And there's a case statement somewhere in the ether. Depending on the client type, I'll point them to the right code base. And in some cases, we've installed those code bases in different client. So he's like, let me get this straight. There's 18 copies of this. They're like, yes. And so every time you ask for something, we have to change the 18 place and then regression test it and make sure we haven't broken anything. Then we have to, you know, make sure what's trunk? That's like, imagine the original, you know. And so he like has this like shocking, he's shocked. Like he doesn't, because he never fully understood the reality of what's happening, why things are taking so long. And that's the person that realized that the reason that it got that way was because of him. You know, it's funny you say that. One of the things I did as a joke, but just to it, so that now, but imagine by the 4th day, for let's say a 1 week Gemba sprint, and that now that they're working together and, you know, the leaders pairing and etc. and removing waste, I would stop everyone working. And I get them in the middle of a room and I'd ask them for a status report. And I would stop the entire momentum. And all I was trying to do was to show the leadership, what do they do to these people all the time? Like how much waste they create. And I sit there with my cup of coffee, like asking for the TPS report, right, from the movie Office Space. And I said, so tell me what's going on? What's the rag status? What's happening? And then they got the joke. I'm showing them that they're not removing waste. Their constant need for status because of the lack of trust creates so much waste.
Yes.
And so, you know, so I would ask them every single day. I was like, you know, you want the teams to move faster? Don't say, how can I make the teams move faster? Ask like, how much waste can I remove? And this is the best way to see the waste that they deal with, you know? And I did this, I get a big Gemba sprint in Chicago. And the leader said, you know, it's really interesting. There's 100 people working on this product. But at night, when I leave the office, because she took part in the Gemba sprint, there is 7 people who are always every night working late. And so I was like, why do you think that is? Like, and go speak to them. And what she realized is there's 7 key people across the 100, and then they are knowledge bottlenecks. and almost the entire product goes as fast as those 7 people. At the end of every Gemba sprint, we create a crap backlog, a waste. Well, you can call it, waste backlog of all of the stuff that they saw, and what I made them to do when they created. Now, this is not a leadership backlog for the most part. All of the waste that they saw, and I would make them actually size the waste. And so if there was a particular waste that they saw, like for example, the build server, and they would size it by how many teams is it impacting, how much time is being wasted, how much. And so this is really a big, if you want to stick with the crap analogy, this is a huge piece of crap, like relative to the other crap, this one is like, it's a massive boulder of crap. And so that effectively becomes their backlog of waste to remove. Because again, I keep on reminding them that you want the system to move faster, remove waste. And so you want to almost, as a coach, channel their energy, make them prioritize the crap based on the size of the crap and say, okay, do this first. And by doing that, they're actually going to build a lot of goodwill with the team, because they're removing stuff from their, and there's things that they can remove immediately, like status meetings, scrum of scrums, etc., etc. Like once they feel like these status meetings are actually hurting the status, remember going back to the story of the CIO, the amount of loyalty and goodwill he built because of how he acted and the respect he showed and the leadership he showed and how much he inspired them and the immediate actions he took was really remarkable. It actually was remarkable. The amount of, and not every manager or leader magically acted that way. Some people just genuinely did not want to be there.
Yep.
And so not everyone got this loyalty for free. Some people were just at Gemba because their manager's manager was at Gemba.
Yeah.
And teams can see right through that. And so, no, no magic sort of happens, but what happens is it accelerates bringing the leadership and the teams together. Telling everyone there's a ceremony called Gemba Sprint and everyone's coming in and there's training. It's just allows everyone, it almost creates a safety blanket, that we're doing a thing, Eventually, I want every sprint to be a Gemba sprint. I want every sprint leadership to be spending the majority of their time with the teams, because we don't need administrators. We don't need like accountants. We need actual people who show leadership, who are helping people solve problems, and creating value, etc.